You stand there for me? You can't just walk in here and demand respect like you own this place.
Sir, we are full guests only. The words didn't just exclude him, they announced it, crisp as policy. Marcus Reed paused beneath the chandelier's glow, its light cold as the tone behind the counter. He didn't argue. The receptionist's smile stayed fixed, practiced, waiting for him to fold. Across the lobby, phones stopped mid-scroll. He placed his card on the marble. Steady, silent. Run it again, he said, what no one knew. In less than 3 minutes, every screen in this hotel would freeze on his command. The Oak Ridge Grand was the kind of hotel that made silence look expensive. Soft jazz swirled beneath the chandeliers. Marble floors mirrored every heel, every hesitation. Behind the reception counter, a pair of clerks rehearsed politeness, crisp uniforms, smiles calibrated to please the right kind of guest. And tonight, apparently, Marcus Reed wasn't one of them. He walked in quietly, carrying only a small weekender bag. No entourage, no bodyguard, no tailored suit to signal power, just a gray hoodie, dark jeans, and the posture of someone used to building empires before sunrise. He'd come home, his home, to spend the night before tomorrow's investor summit. The Oak Ridge Grand wasn't just another property. It was the flagship of Reed Holdings, the first hotel he'd ever built from the ground up. Every light, every scent, every melody in this lobby had once been approved by his signature. But the woman at the counter didn't know that. She didn't even look up when he approached. "Checking in?" she asked, her tone flat. Already halfway to no, yes. "Marcus Reed," he said calmly. "There should be a suite reserved under my name." Her fingers tapped the keyboard. Slow, deliberate. Then the pause came. The pause that meant something had shifted. Her eyes narrowed. Her voice softened but sharpened at the same time. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see any reservation under that name." "That's fine," Marcus said. Still patient, checked the owner's block. She blinked, then smirked slightly, a micro-expression he'd seen 1,000 times in boardrooms that forgot their own balance sheets. "Owner's block?" she repeated, as if tasting a foreign phrase. "We don't have that category here. We're at full capacity. Maybe try a different hotel in the area?" Across the counter, her colleague pretended to focus on a screen that didn't need reading. A couple waiting in line exchanged looks, that kind of pitying curiosity that travels faster than logic. Marcus kept his eyes steady, his breathing even. He could have flashed his ID. He could have said the words, "I built this place." But he didn't. Instead, he reached for his wallet, removed a black metal card, and slid it forward. "Run it again," he said quietly. The receptionist hesitated. She held the card like it might stain her fingers. From the far end of the lobby, the assistant manager appeared thin, tired, mid-30s, already defensive. "What seems to be the issue here?" The woman answered before Marcus could. "This guest insists there's a special suite for him. We're full tonight." "Guest," Marcus repeated softly, testing the word. The assistant manager gave a polite chuckle. "Sir, our presidential suite is booked. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable elsewhere?" The air thickened. A bellhop slowed his pace, sensing the tension but not daring to interfere. The pianist at the corner missed a note. Marcus rested his hands on the counter. No threat, just presence. He spoke, low, clear. "I understand policy," he said, "but I also understand ownership." The manager frowned. "Excuse me?" Marcus didn't raise his voice. "Check the holding company name on your pay stub." A flicker of confusion crossed the man's face. The receptionist froze mid-keystroke. For the first time, both really looked at him. Something in his stillness, the steadiness of his tone, unsettled the script they'd rehearsed. The manager's radio crackled. "Priority override, Reed Holdings, verification in progress." He blinked. Marcus picked up his card, slid it back into his wallet, and stepped aside. "You'll want to answer that," he said calmly. And just as he turned toward the marble stairs, the lobby lights dimmed for a brief second. The kind of flicker that happens when a system updates its access protocols. The hotel's digital screens glitched. Reception monitors refreshed. Across the counter, the booking system flashed in bold letters. Owner Reed Holdings, priority override active. Silence fell. The jazz stopped mid-bar. Marcus didn't look back. He simply adjusted the strap of his bag, the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't satisfaction. It was certainty, the kind of quiet certainty that comes when a man no longer needs to prove who he is. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Every second stretched thin between the chandeliers and the marble counter. Claire, the lead receptionist, tried to reset her posture, to pull professionalism back onto her face like a mask that no longer fit. Beside her, the assistant manager fumbled with his tablet, pretending to troubleshoot a system that suddenly knew more than he did. On the screen, the words, Reed Holdings Owner Access Active, pulsed in quiet defiance. Marcus didn't move. He stood a few steps from the counter, hands in his pockets, watching the scene unfold with the same patience that had built his empire, one contract, one doubt, one boardroom at a time. He wasn't here to humiliate anyone, but the system they had trusted to gatekeep his own property was now humbling them for him. Sir, the manager started, his voice cracking, I think there's been some sort of... No, Marcus said softly. There hasn't. The pause afterward was surgical. He didn't fill it. He let the moment hang long enough for the truth to settle in. Tessa, the younger clerk, stared at the glowing screen, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. Owner override, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Across the lobby, conversations had gone still. A bellhop froze mid-step, his luggage cart silent. Even the pianist's hands lingered above the keys, uncertain whether to play. Everyone could feel it, that invisible pivot when status flips, when perception catches up to reality. The people who had dismissed him 5 minutes ago were now standing inside his domain, subject to his standards, his policies, his grace. Claire cleared her throat, her voice trembling. Mr. Reed, we didn't realize. Marcus turned toward her, his expression unreadable. You didn't need to realize, he said quietly. You just needed to respect. Her breath caught. That line, simple, clean, deliberate, cut deeper than anger ever could. The assistant manager's radio buzzed again, corporate verification complete, owner confirmed on site. He blinked rapidly, as though hoping the sentence might disappear. Instead, it echoed through the lobby speakers for everyone to hear. Marcus tilted his head slightly. Now you understand, he said. Respect isn't a policy. It's culture. And yours needs work. Tessa looked up. Her eyes met Marcus's for half a second, just long enough for him to see the difference. She wasn't complicit. She was caught in a hierarchy that punished hesitation. He made a mental note. Every system had one truth keeper, someone who saw but couldn't speak. He would remember her. The manager finally stepped from behind the desk, his voice low and apologetic. Mr. Reed, please accept our sincerest apologies. The staff was only following... Marcus raised a hand. Process? The man nodded. Marcus' tone stayed even. Then let's fix the process. He took out his phone, opened a secure app, and typed a single command. The front desk monitors refreshed again, displaying a new message. Immediate staff, review pending owner directive. A new sender, muddy 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 muddy. Claire's face drained of color. The manager swallowed hard. Tessa covered her mouth. Marcus didn't gloat. He simply said, everyone deserves a standard they can trust. Tonight, we'll set one. Then he looked at Tessa. Can you fetch operations from the back office? She nodded quickly and hurried off, relief and fear chasing each other across her face. As she disappeared behind the corridor door, Marcus turned back to the others. You thought I wanted a room, he said softly. I came for perspective. No one spoke. The lobby had gone from cold to reverent, a courtroom without a judge's gavel, just presence. The chandeliers above flickered once more, not dramatic, just enough to reflect the shift in power. Marcus exhaled slowly, the faintest hint of fatigue passing through his eyes. He wasn't angry. He was assessing, and for the first time that night, the hotel began to remember who it belonged to. The operations director arrived first, a tall man in a navy suit whose name tag gleamed like authority. He walked quickly, eyes scanning the lobby as if searching for a misunderstanding to correct. Behind him trailed two more staff members from HR, whispering nervously to each other, glancing at the frozen monitors that still displayed the owner's override message. They'd been summoned without warning, and every instinct told them that this was not a routine service complaint. Marcus waited by the column near the grand staircase, hands clasped loosely in front of him. He wasn't pacing or posturing, just present. When the director approached, Marcus nodded once. "Mr. Reed," the man said, his tone a mix of relief and fear, "we didn't know you were arriving tonight. Had we been informed at first?" Marcus interrupted gently, "You would have performed." The words were soft, but they landed like weight. "This isn't about information," he continued. "It's about instinct, how your people treat what they don't expect." The director hesitated. "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Marcus asked, tilting his head slightly. His gaze moved past the man to Claire, who now stood by the counter, pale, her corporate smile shattered. "Because if you did," Marcus said, "she wouldn't have thought my presence was a threat to her system." Wait. A ripple moved through the small crowd of employees now gathering at a distance. Housekeepers, bellhops, a bartender peeking from the lounge. Everyone could feel that this wasn't just a reprimand. It was an audit unfolding in real time. And unlike most audits, there were no spreadsheets or quarterly reviews. Just a man, his silence, and the echo of a mistake magnified by pride. Marcus turned toward the counter again. "Claire," he said quietly, "when you looked at me, what did you see?" "She swallowed a guest, sir." He nodded. "Good. But which kind?" Her eyes flickered. "I wasn't sure?" "That's the problem," Marcus said. "You needed to be sure not of status, but of service. Hospitality without respect isn't hospitality. It's theater." He let the words breathe. No one dared interrupt. Even the director stood still, pen frozen halfway through an anxious note. Marcus's phone buzzed once, a notification from corporate security. The message read, "Compliance team online, audit recording initiated." He locked the screen and slipped it back into his pocket. The moment didn't need escalation. It needed truth. He looked around the lobby at the guests who had quietly resumed watching from the lounge, at the employees clustered near the elevators. "This place," he said, his voice low but carrying, "wasn't built for luxury. It was built for dignity. Every marble tile, every chandelier, every glass of wine in this building was meant to remind people they belong here, not to question who does." The pianist, unsure, struck a single hesitant note. It hung in the air like punctuation. Marcus turned to the director. "Freeze tonight's operations. Payroll, check-in logs, service reports. We'll do a full review in the morning. Anyone who treated policy as permission to humiliate off the floor until further notice. And for you came and variant." "Yes, sir," the director said quickly, eyes wide. Claire's voice cracked. "Mr. Reed, I didn't mean." "I know," Marcus said softly. "That's what makes it worse. You didn't mean it, but you still did it." He let the silence stretch again, not to shame her, but to teach the room how reflection feels. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Tessa stays." She recognized the moment before it turned wrong. The young clerk's eyes widened in disbelief. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. Marcus gave a small nod. "This isn't about blame," he said finally. "It's about standards and how easy it is to forget them once the suits leave the room." He stepped toward the elevator, each footfall measured, quiet, final. And as the doors closed behind him, the lobby seemed to exhale, not relief, but recognition. For the first time that night, everyone understood. The room had never been about a room. It had always been about respect. The elevator carried Marcus to the executive floor, but his mind stayed in the lobby below. Every marble tile down there was a reflection of the culture he'd built, or thought he had. Tonight it had shown him something he hadn't wanted to see. the slow erosion of empathy, polished to look like procedure. He wasn't angry, he was calculating. Every company hits that point when policies start replacing principles. He'd just seen the proof live in high definition under chandelier light. When the doors opened, the suite was quiet, its skyline view stretching across Chicago's winter haze. Marcus walked to the desk, placed his phone down, and tapped the internal line. "Ops command," he said. "Do you have the security feed from the lobby?" "Yes, Mr. Reed," came the voice. "All recorded, backed up, and time-stamped." "Good," Marcus replied. "Keep it active. I'm coming back down." He didn't need an audience. But the truth had to be seen, not just by him. He straightened his jacket, loosened his shoulders, and stepped back into the elevator. The return ride felt longer. By the time the doors slid open again, the lobby had gathered into uneasy stillness. Operations, HR, and a few night shift supervisors stood clustered near the reception. Tessa waited at the side, clutching a folder of reports she hadn't been asked for but brought anyway. Claire and the assistant manager had retreated into silence, eyes darting between Marcus and the glowing monitors. The screen behind the counter now displayed a still frame from the earlier encounter, time-stamped, archived, and very public. Marcus stopped halfway across the marble floor. He spoke quietly, yet every word seemed amplified by the lobby's acoustics. "Do you want proof on system?" he asked. "Or do you already know what you saw?" No one answered. The question wasn't meant for response, it was meant for reckoning. He gestured toward the screen. "This," he said, "isn't a scandal. It's a mirror. And if it feels uncomfortable, that means it's working." The HR officer shifted awkwardly. "Mr. Reed, we assure you this doesn't reflect the company's values." "Then whose values are they?" Marcus cut in, his tone controlled but absolute. He took a few steps closer, his shoes whispering against the marble. "Because every organization has two sets of rules, the ones on paper and the ones people live by when no one's watching." The operations director exhaled heavily. "Sir, would you like to file an internal buy?" Marcus held up a hand. "It's already filed. Auto-logged through compliance." He turned slightly, catching Tessa's gaze. "Miss Owens, how long have you worked here?" 8 months, she said, startled. And in 8 months, he asked, "How many times have you watched something like tonight happen?" Her throat tightened. "A few, sir, not like this, but..." Marcus nodded. "Thank you for answering honestly. You'll stay for the audit team in the morning." He turned back to the group. "This isn't about one night or one employee. It's about what happens when respect becomes conditional." He let the sentence rest, the silence wrapping around it. Then, with calm precision, he said, "Effective immediately, all front desk personnel are suspended pending review. Full retraining required, no exceptions." Claire's voice broke. "Mr. Reed, please. This was a misunderstanding." Marcus met her eyes. "No, Miss Hale. A misunderstanding ends when truth arrives. You tried to keep it outside." No one moved. No one argued. Even the guests, lingering by the lounge, had gone still, realizing they were watching more than a correction. They were watching accountability made visible. Marcus took a slow breath. Then, almost gently, he added, "In my company, we don't punish people. We realign them." He looked at Tessa. "Send the clip to compliance and legal. Let them see what dignity looks like under pressure." "Yes, sir," she said softly. And as Marcus walked away, the lights above seemed to shift, not brighter, just cleaner. The hotel's system began uploading the footage, and across the city, a quiet ripple of reform had already started. By morning, Chicago's skyline had thawed into a pale gray. The Oak Ridge Grand stood serene from the outside, glass polished, banners immaculate. But inside, the heartbeat of the place had changed. Word had spread through every hallway and group chat. The owner had been denied a room in his own hotel. No press release, no viral video yet. Just whispers, the kind that carried truth faster than headlines ever could. Marcus arrived in the staff conference room at 8 a.m. sharp. No entourage, no corporate theater. He took the same seat he used to occupy when the hotel was still a construction site, and he'd reviewed blueprints by hand. Across the table sat the department heads, operations, HR, hospitality, and legal, all looking like people rehearsing apologies. That wouldn't be enough. Tessa stood near the doorway, clutching a notebook, unsure if she even belonged in the meeting. Marcus gestured to her. Stay. You've earned your seat. The HR director spoke first, nervous but polished. Mr. Reed, we've already initiated retraining modules for the front desk team and temporary replacements from partner properties. The compliance log you requested has been archived and internal review. Marcus raised a hand. Pause. She fell silent instantly. He looked around the table. When something this fundamental breaks, he said, we don't fix it with modules. We fix it with meaning. He pressed a key on his tablet. The large screen behind him flickered to life, replaying the footage from the night before. Claire's words, the dismissive tone, the look that said, you don't belong here. The room shifted uncomfortably. Even those who weren't present could feel the sting. Marcus let it run for 15 seconds before hitting pause. That, he said quietly, is the moment every organization faces. Not when it's public, but when it's private, silent, procedural. That's where character lives. He turned to the operations director. I built this company so people could walk through our doors and feel human first, client second. Somewhere along the line, we swapped those. Able ends? The director nodded, ashamed. It won't happen again, sir. It will, Marcus corrected, if we don't change why it happened. He stood, walking to the window. The skyline reflected faintly in the glass. Freeze discretionary bonuses for all executives this quarter. Redirect the funds to an empathy training initiative, one that includes every level of staff, not just frontline employees. The legal counsel frowned slightly. That could raise concerns with the board. Then tell the board they work for me, Marcus said evenly. And this is how I define profit. The room went silent again. He turned back to Tessa. You were the only one who didn't hide behind silence last night. That matters. Her eyes widened. Sir, I didn't do much. You did enough, Marcus interrupted. And that's how leadership begins. He handed her a printed memo. Her promotion to shift supervisor, effective immediately. Run the next orientation. Teach them what you saw. The HR director blinked. Orientation, you mean? Yes, Marcus said. Reopen the hotel tonight. But before the first guest checks in, I want every staff member to sign a single statement. Respect is non-negotiable. Put it on the wall behind the desk in gold lettering. He closed the tablet and looked around the room one last time. People think, I canceled a booking last night. I didn't. I canceled complacency. Ha! Then he turned to leave, stopping only once at the door. Document the process. Send it to every property in the chain. Let this be the case study we never forget. Tessa nodded, already scribbling notes. As Marcus stepped back into the lobby, the morning light caught the marble differently. Softer, less polished, more human. Guests were starting to check in again. For the first time in years, the Oak Ridge Grand didn't just look grand, it felt right. 3 days later, the Oak Ridge Grand no longer smelled like tension. The floral air diffusers still worked the same, the marble floors still gleamed, but something invisible had shifted. Staff voices were quieter, not fearful, but aware. Every good morning, sir, carried a little more intention, as if the weight of words finally meant something again. In the executive boardroom upstairs, Marcus sat opposite a panel of auditors flown in from Reed Holdings' corporate ethics division. They were professionals, neutral, clinical, trained to measure integrity in data sets and patterns of behavior. But this time, the evidence wasn't numbers. It was human. The lead auditor, a woman named Daria Nguyen, clicked her pen. Mr. Reed, we've completed the cultural compliance review for the Oak Ridge Grand, she said. Her tone was calm, objective, yet the findings on the tablet before her were anything but routine. In the past 12 months, we've logged 47 service complaints flagged for implicit bias markers, subtle tone discrepancies, micro-denials of access, selective enforcement of policy. Marcus leaned back slightly. 47, he repeated, as if tasting the number. Correct, Daria confirmed. None escalated because they were categorized as customer misunderstanding or attitude non-compliance. He nodded slowly. That's how bias hides, he said. It learns to speak the language of professionalism. The auditors exchanged glances. Marcus wasn't angry, but his calm was surgical, the kind that left no room for excuses. He stood and walked toward the window, the skyline of Chicago stretching beneath a wash of winter light. I want you to expand this audit, he said. Company-wide? Daria asked. Yes, every property, every department. Freeze all bonus pools until retraining is complete. This isn't punishment, it's recalibration. Beides tuero, see when sign? He turned, facing the table. Document everything. I want these findings published internally. Transparency isn't a risk, it's a reset. Another auditor frowned slightly. Sir, you're authorizing open access to internal misconduct data. That could alarm investors. Marcus smiled faintly. If investors are afraid of ethics, they're not investing, they're gambling. The room went still. Marcus walked back to his seat, placing both palms flat on the polished surface of the table. This company's brand isn't marble or chandeliers. It's trust. Lose that, and the architecture collapses. Daria nodded slowly. Understood. The ethics team will begin immediate cross-property reviews. We'll need local liaisons at each site. Marcus looked at Tessa, seated quietly at the far end of the table, taking notes. She'll lead them, he said. The auditors blinked. Hershey's knew. She's honest, Marcus replied. That's rarer than experience. Way silled. Tessa froze, then straightened, eyes bright with a mixture of shock and determination. Yes, sir, she said softly. Marcus smiled just enough to soften the tension. Your first task, he said, is to interview every staff member. Not about rules, but about moments. Ask when they felt unseen. That's where the work begins. The meeting adjourned in silence, the kind that follows clarity. As the auditors left, Marcus remained seated, staring at the company crest embossed on the table. He thought of his mother's words from decades ago. Build something that remembers people, even when people forget. He'd built it, but he'd almost lost it to efficiency and polish. Outside the boardroom, the staff elevator opened. Guests checked in without delay. A new sign now hung behind the reception desk. Gold letters etched into black stone. Respect is non-negotiable. Marcus stepped into the lobby, watching a young family receive their keys from Tessa. The father smiled. First time here, place feels different. Tessa returned the smile. That's the point, sir. Marcus exhaled quietly. The audit wasn't over. It had only just begun, not on paper, but in every greeting, every glance, every pause that now carried the weight of awareness. 3 weeks later, the hotel lobby looked the same. Gold light, marble gleam, polished brass rails, but it sounded different. The echo of heels and luggage wheels now blended with small laughter, with greetings that felt human again. No tension humming underneath, no hierarchy disguised as etiquette. Just service with conscience? Marcus returned quietly that afternoon, without notice. No press team, no photographers, not even an assistant. He liked walking in anonymously, not to test anyone, but to feel the culture without its makeup. He paused near the revolving door and simply watched. The rhythm was steady, warm. A bellhop helped an elderly guest with her bags, smiling in a way that wasn't scripted. Behind the counter, Tessa coordinated check-ins with calm precision. Marcus waited his turn like everyone else. When Tessa finally looked up and saw him, her expression flickered, surprise, then a kind of proud composure. Welcome back to the Oak Ridge Grand, Mr. Reed, she said softly. Her tone was respectful, not performative. He smiled. Just Marcus today. Righto, she nodded. Then, welcome home, Marcus. When I rate Ozer, that single word, home, landed differently. For months, the Oak Ridge had been a machine of prestige. 5-star ratings, luxury partnerships, immaculate decor, but prestige had almost killed its purpose. Now, the space finally breathed again. Marcus could feel it, the quiet humility of a place that had rediscovered its soul. He leaned against the counter, How's the new training program? Tessa grinned faintly. Intense. Emotional, actually. We're not just learning procedures, we're unlearning habits. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's harder work. She hesitated. Claire came back yesterday. She asked to start over in guest relations this time. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Good! Let her! People change when systems let them! A family entered behind him, tired travelers with messy luggage and two restless kids. The front desk handled them effortlessly. No sighs, no subtle dismissals. Tessa offered the children hot cocoa vouchers from the caf. The parents' faces softened with gratitude. Marcus caught that moment, small, fleeting, but worth more than any corporate metric. He walked toward the lounge, where the pianist was playing a softer tune than before. The song wasn't background noise anymore. It was atmosphere, alive and kind. The manager on duty approached nervously, a man Marcus hadn't met. Good afternoon, sir. I hope everything meets your expectations. Trained, sure. Marcus smiled slightly. It's exceeding them. You've built something honest here. The man exhaled, visibly relieved. Thank you, Mr. Reed. We've tried to make the team proud again. Marcus glanced back toward the front desk, where Tessa was training a new hire, showing her how to speak with empathy, not authority. He nodded. You're on the right track. Keep it that way. 19. He took a seat near the window, opened his tablet, and reviewed the latest audit updates from across his portfolio. 4 other properties had followed the Oak Ridge model. Employee satisfaction was up. Complaints marked by tone bias were down 63%. And guest loyalty, the intangible measure that marketing never quite captures, had doubled. Marcus closed the tablet. He didn't need charts to confirm what he could feel. Respect had become operational. Dignity was measurable again. As he stood to leave, Tessa caught his eye from across the room and gave a small nod. Not the kind that sought approval, but the kind that shared understanding. The kind that said, we're holding the line. Marcus adjusted his jacket and walked toward the exit. The doorman opened the glass door with quiet grace. Have a good evening, sir. Marcus smiled. You already made it one. One. Outside, the city hummed its usual noise, car horns, footsteps, chatter, but inside that building, a different kind of sound had taken root. The sound of a company remembering what humanity feels like. A month later, the email went live at 7 a.m. sharp. Subject line, Reed Holdings, full transparency report, service ethics, inclusion review. No PR filter, no marketing polish, just a 42-page document signed by Marcus himself, sent to every investor, employee, and partner across 12 countries. Within an hour, the story hit the business media. Hotel chain publishes its own bias audit. The headlines were half disbelief, half respect. The world wasn't used to corporations admitting fault without being cornered. But Marcus hadn't done it to impress anyone. He'd done it to make silence impossible. At Reed Holdings headquarters, the press room buzzed. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered, and the backdrop read in gold letters. Accountability is our luxury. Marcus stepped up to the podium, calm as ever. He didn't rehearse his speech. He didn't need to. Everything he wanted to say was written in the last month of work at the Oak Ridge Grand. Good morning, he began, voice steady but grounded. 4 weeks ago, I walked into one of our properties and experienced what too many of our guests already had. The quiet kind of exclusion that hides behind professionalism. I wasn't angry that night. I was disappointed because I built a company to prevent exactly that. The room went silent. Every journalist leaned in. Marcus continued. So, instead of issuing an apology statement, we issued a system reset. Every Reed property will undergo empathy certification, starting with leadership. Bonuses will now be tied to guest respect metrics, not revenue alone. because revenue without respect is theft. It takes from the dignity of the people who trust us. A hand rose from the front row, a reporter from the Wall Street Ledger. Mr. Reed, aren't you concerned this level of transparency could scare shareholders? Marcus smiled faintly. Then we'll attract the kind of shareholders who believe ethics compound interest. Laughter rippled through the room, but it wasn't mockery. It was relief, the sound of people hearing something true. He gestured toward the projection screen behind him, showing data from the audit. Complaint reduction by 63%, staff turnover down by half, guest satisfaction at a 5-year high. Tessa's name appeared in the credits of the Reform Committee. I'm not here to prove we're perfect, Marcus said. I'm here to prove we're learning. And learning is the most valuable currency in business because it never devalues. The room broke into applause. Not explosive, measured, genuine. Reporters looked at each other, realizing they weren't covering a scandal, but a blueprint. After the conference, Marcus returned to his office. The skyline outside looked brighter, or maybe he just noticed more of it. His assistant entered with a tablet. Sir, social response is overwhelming. People are calling it the Reed Standard. Marcus smiled. Let them. Standards are meant to be kept, not branded. He opened his inbox, hundreds of emails from employees across the world. Front desk clerks, janitors, executives, even guests. Each message shared a version of the same story. I saw myself in what happened. Thank you for changing it. He leaned back, reading a note from Tessa sent at dawn. First empathy workshop complete, staff cried, guests joined in. It's working. Marcus typed back, good, keep it human, the rest will follow. Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of the city, restless, alive. He closed the blinds halfway, letting in only half the light, like a balance between exposure and reflection. Change, he thought, shouldn't feel triumphant. It should feel responsible. And in that quiet office above Chicago, responsibility finally felt like peace. 90 days after the incident, the Oak Ridge Grand had become something else entirely. Not just a hotel, not just a case study, but a living classroom for what accountability looks like when it's designed, not declared. The marble still gleamed, the music still whispered through the air, but the silence had changed tone. It no longer carried fear, it carried awareness. Marcus returned unannounced, again in plain clothes, slipping through the revolving doors on a Friday evening. He liked that nobody flinched when he walked in now. A sign of progress wasn't recognition, it was normalization. The lobby felt alive, bellhops greeting guests by name, the scent of coffee replacing the sterile perfume of corporate branding. He stopped near the lounge and watched as Tessa led a short staff briefing. She stood where the manager used to, posture steady, voice calm. Remember, she said, policy tells us what to do, empathy tells us how. Marcus smiled quietly. She had grown into her authority the way real leaders do without demanding it. A young trainee noticed Marcus watching and hurried over. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Oak Ridge Grand. Do you have a reservation? Marcus nodded. Yes, under Reed. The trainee tapped the keyboard. Ah, Mr. Marcus Reed. Welcome home, sir. He said it casually, with no hint of the fear that had once haunted this counter. Would you like your usual suite or the conference level? Marcus chuckled. Surprise me? While waiting for his key, he noticed something new. A wall of framed letters near the reception desk. Not awards, thank you notes. Guests from across the country had written them after their stays. One read, I came here feeling like an outsider. I left feeling seen. Thank you for that. Another was signed by a former staff member who had once been suspended. The retraining saved my career. It made me a better person, not just an employee. Marcus read each one slowly. They weren't marketing material, they were receipts of growth. Every sentence reminded him why he'd built the Oak Ridge in the first place. Not to sell comfort, but to practice equality in motion. Tessa approached, catching him mid-reflection. You like the wall? He nodded. I love it. It's louder than any ad campaign. She smiled. The idea came from the team. They wanted guests to see the impact of respect. Marcus tilted his head. Proud. Good. Make sure it never turns into decoration. Keep it alive. A couple nearby was checking in, and the husband turned to Marcus. You're the owner, aren't you? Marcus smiled slightly, guilty. The man extended his hand. I read the audit report. Brave move. Most companies would have buried it. Marcus shook his hand. If we bury mistakes, we plant more of them. The man laughed softly. You should put that on the lobby wall, too. Raiderdom, brosen taxen iniwo. Later that evening, Marcus sat in the caf, a cup of coffee warming his hands. The city's reflection rippled across the window beside him. He watched staff move, coordinated, alert, kind, like musicians who'd learned to play together again. Every small act, a door held open, a question asked with care, felt deliberate. It was culture, performed effortlessly. His phone buzzed once, an update from headquarters. Reed Holdings' ethics index was now trending as an international model. Several major corporations had requested to license the Reed standard training for their own teams. Marcus typed back a short reply. License it for free. The point is to spread it, not sell it. He finished his coffee, set the cup down gently, and exhaled. The Oak Ridge Grand was steady. Now, not perfect, but steady. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel like an auditor or a reformer. He felt like a guest again. That, he thought, was the real victory, when the place you built finally learns to welcome you without needing to know who you are. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the stage of the Global Service Ethics Summit in Washington, D.C. The conference room glittered with chandeliers and glass walls overlooking the Potomac River, but the energy inside was anything but decorative. Executives, journalists, hospitality leaders, and government officials filled every seat. Behind Marcus, the screen displayed 3 words in gold: the Reed Standard. He looked calm, not rehearsed, the same quiet composure that had once unsettled a receptionist who didn't know who he was. Now, that same calm had become a movement. He began. 6 months ago, one mistake in a hotel lobby forced us to face something bigger than customer service. It forced us to ask, who do we become when no one's watching? That question built a policy. Then a culture. Now a standard. A hush settled over the audience. Marcus walked slowly across the stage, his voice low but deliberate. We didn't fix bias with slogans. We fixed it with systems. We didn't issue apologies. We issued audits. And we learned that reform isn't a press release, it's a habit. He paused. Behind him, the screen shifted to show photos from the Oak Ridge Grand, staff training sessions, guest testimonials, and a familiar sign in black marble, respect is non-negotiable. Marcus continued, since then, the Reed Standard has been adopted by 24 corporations and 6 major hotel chains. Employee turnover dropped, guest satisfaction rose. But the real victory? Not one of those companies had to apologize publicly in the last quarter. Because integrity, once built into structure, prevents the need for damage control. Applause spread through the hall, not explosive, but reverent. He smiled slightly, letting the sound wash over him before speaking again. You see, accountability isn't punishment. It's protection of culture, of reputation, of trust. When a system remembers its humanity, profit follows naturally. He gestured toward a corner of the room. Tessa stood there, wearing her new badge, Director of Culture Initiatives. She had come not as an assistant, but as a co-speaker. Marcus nodded to her. The person who helped start this isn't me, he said. It's the one who spoke up before anyone else did. Burrs. Tessa stepped forward, her hands slightly trembling, but her voice firm. I wasn't brave that night, she said. I was scared. But I also knew silence was agreement. What we've built since then proves something simple. When leadership listens, courage multiplies. The room erupted in applause this time. Reporters scribbled notes. CEOs nodded. Even competitors stood to clap. Marcus looked at Tessa, proud but grounded. He knew this wasn't a story of redemption, it was replication. After the event, Marcus stepped outside to the terrace overlooking the river. The wind carried the faint murmur of applause through the glass doors behind him. Daria Nguyen, the lead auditor from months ago, joined him quietly. "You've started something global, Marcus," she said. He shook his head. "No, I just refuse to hide something local." She smiled. Still, not many would have turned humiliation into infrastructure. Marcus looked out across the water. "That's the point," he said softly. "If change isn't structural, it's sentimental, and sentiment fades." Down below, the city lights shimmered, each window, each reflection, a reminder that the real work never ends. The Reed Standard was no longer a reaction. It was a compass. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed a message from an airline CEO. "Implementing your empathy protocol fleet-wide. First training starts next month. Thank you." Marcus smiled faintly. He didn't reply right away. He simply looked at the city, thinking how far one quiet correction in a hotel lobby had traveled. What began as a moment of exclusion had become a map for inclusion, not just in buildings, but in behavior. And for the first time in his career, Marcus didn't feel like a businessman delivering reform. He felt like a witness to evolution, the kind built from silence, proof, and grace. 1 year later, the Oak Ridge Grand Lobby had become a pilgrimage site for people who worked in hospitality, not because of scandal, but because of transformation. Students from business schools, ethics researchers, and CEOs visited the hotel to see where it all began. The marble counter where Marcus had once been denied now gleamed under softer lighting, flanked by a plaque engraved with 12 words. "Respect is not training, it's memory in motion." Juan. Marcus arrived quietly that morning, wearing the same gray hoodie he'd worn the night of the incident. No announcement, no entourage, just curiosity to see how the story lived without him. He stood by the revolving doors and listened. The lobby buzzed with small acts of grace. A bellhop crouched to tie a guest's shoe. A receptionist walked around the counter to guide an elderly woman to her room. A manager thanked a cleaner by name. Each gesture was proof the system worked, because it now rewarded empathy instead of hierarchy. Tessa spotted him first. Her face lit up with recognition. "Marcus," she said, walking over with the easy authority of someone who'd grown into leadership without losing humility. "You came back." "Had to see it for myself," he replied. "Does it still hold?" She smiled. "Stronger than ever. The Reed Standards in 29 countries now. Even the UN requested a framework briefing for their workplace equality division." Marcus chuckled softly. "Imagine that, a hotel lobby teaching the world ethics." Tessa's eyes gleamed. "It's more than that. It's a new language. People don't say customer service anymore. They say human service." He nodded, moved, but measured. "Good. Then we did more than fix a mistake. We started memory maintenance. Sorry to things of some." They walked toward the lounge, where a group of young trainees were gathered around a screen, watching clips from the original audit briefing. One paused the video and asked, "Is that really him?" Tessa smiled. "That's him. The man who taught us that silence can either build walls or open doors." Marcus raised an eyebrow, amused. "You quote better than I speak." Laughter rippled through the group. It was light, comfortable, the kind of laughter that used to feel forbidden in corporate spaces. He looked around and saw what real sustainability meant. Not numbers on a report, but joy that didn't need permission. Later that afternoon, Marcus met with a film crew documenting the movement's first anniversary. They set up cameras in the same spot where it all started. A journalist asked, "Mr. Reed, if you could relive that night, would you handle it any differently?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "No," he said finally, "because that night revealed the truth, not about them, but about us, about how easily comfort turns into blindness." The interviewer leaned forward. "And what do you hope people remember from it?" Marcus smiled faintly. "That leadership isn't who walks in first, it's who stays when things go wrong." The journalist nodded, visibly moved. The camera light blinked red, recording, immortalizing the calm gravity in his voice. When the shoot wrapped, Marcus stood for a while by the same counter, tracing the smooth edge of the marble with his fingers. The last year replayed in flashes. The audit, the speeches, the reforms, the new hires who'd never known the old system. Tessa approached quietly. "Heading out? Heading out?" "Yeah," he said. "This place doesn't need me anymore. That's the best sign of success. She smiled. It remembers you, though. Marcus nodded. Then let it remember the standard, not the story. He walked toward the door, passing beneath the golden plaque one last time. Outside, the city moved with its usual rhythm, fast, restless, indifferent. But behind him, the Oak Ridge Grand glowed like a heartbeat of quiet change. It wasn't a monument. It was a mirror. And it kept reflecting what the world could be if it only learned to see with respect. 2 years after the night that started everything, Reed Holdings no longer needed to talk about the Reed Standard. It had become instinct, a built-in reflex across industries that once called it an experiment. Banks were using it. Airlines had integrated empathy certification into pilot and crew onboarding. Luxury retail chains had rewritten entire policies around its structure. And every time Marcus's name appeared on a panel or article, it came with the same phrase: the man who made ethics scalable. But Marcus never liked the word legacy. Legacy, he thought, was too often the museum of what used to be alive. He preferred the word maintenance. So, when Reed Holdings board scheduled a 10-year impact audit 2 years early, Marcus didn't frame it as celebration. He called it a recertification. The boardroom that morning was quiet except for the soft clicks of laptops and the hum of city life far below. On the wall, the Reed Holdings logo had been replaced temporarily with 3 words: audit, relearn, renew. Marcus sat at the head of the table but didn't speak first. He wanted to listen. Daria Nguyen, the same auditor from the first review, began the report. Mr. Reed, the numbers are consistent across all 12 divisions. Complaint rates remain at historical lows. Retention's up 21%. But what's remarkable is the pattern in language. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Language? She nodded. Yes. Words like guest, team, policy, service, they've shifted meanings in internal reports. Employees use them with relational context now, not transactional. Marcus smiled faintly. So we didn't just change behavior, we changed vocabulary. Daria nodded. Exactly. And vocabulary outlives leadership. One, do. Some pray. He looked around the table at faces both familiar and new executives who'd joined after the reform, and younger staff who'd never experienced the culture before it. Tessa sat near the end of the table, now wearing the title Chief of Cultural Operations. When she spoke, her tone was steady, confident. Culture audits used to scare people, she said. Now they look forward to them. They see it as reflection, not inspection. Marcus leaned back, proud. That means the system no longer depends on charisma, he said. It depends on conscience. He tapped the folder before him, the audit summary. Let's formalize this. Make recertification a global calendar event, like tax season or performance review. Every year, every division asks itself one question. Did we protect dignity? No one objected. They were long past the phase where good ideas met resistance. After the meeting, Marcus lingered at the window. From this height, the city looked like a network of lights and movement, systems inside systems, all pulsing toward purpose. Tessa joined him quietly. You're thinking about expansion, she said. He smiled always. Where next? Education, Marcus replied. Imagine if schools taught what we had to unlearn as adults. She nodded slowly. That's ambitious. He chuckled. So was respect. They stood in silence for a while. Below, the streets buzzed with life, strangers crossing paths with the same invisible chance for decency or disregard. Marcus thought about that lobby the way one night of misjudgment had rippled into systems, policies, and now curricula. He still didn't believe in legacy, but maybe, he thought, maintenance could be inherited too. As the afternoon light shifted across the glass, he turned to Tessa. When I'm gone, he said quietly, promise me one thing. She met his gaze. Anything. And too wide, one. Don't let them turn this into branding. Tessa smiled. Not while I'm here. Marcus nodded, satisfied. The audit was done. But the work, the real work, was still alive. And in that moment, he realized that legacy wasn't about what you leave behind. It's about what keeps standing when you stop holding it up. 3 years later, the Oak Ridge Grand celebrated its 10th anniversary, not with fireworks, but with silence. No red carpet, no press gala, just a lobby full of people who understood what the building meant, a sanctuary for fairness disguised as a hotel. Marcus had stepped down as CEO 6 months earlier. He declined every interview, every award, every documentary request. When asked why, he simply said, "You can't lead forever, but you can design something that keeps leading after you." Tonight, he returned as a guest, anonymous again, like the first night. Same hoodie, same stillness. The marble floor greeted him with the faint echo of memory, but now the sound felt warm. Tessa met him near the counter, though her badge no longer read Director. It read President Reed Holdings. He smiled. "You kept your promise." She smiled back. "And you kept your distance." The hotel was alive. Children laughing, staff laughing with them, music softer, lighter. The "Respect is non-negotiable" plaque was still there, though now it was joined by another inscription beneath it. Founded by Marcus Reed, sustained by everyone. Tessa guided him toward the lounge. "They're holding a panel tonight," she said. "New employees share what the Reed Standard means to them." He raised an eyebrow. "Do they even know who started it?" "Some do," she said, "but it doesn't matter anymore. They live it. That's the point." Wider ways? Then talk sermon in sermons. They sat at the back of the room as a young receptionist took the microphone. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied with conviction. "When I joined," she said, "I thought hospitality was about smiling through stress. Now I know it's about making space for people to exist without shrinking." The audience nodded, quiet and moved. Another employee, a bellhop barely 20, added, "Respect used to be a rule. Now it's a reflex." Marcus exhaled slowly. That was it, the full circle. The moment when principles no longer needed authorship. After the panel, Tessa led him upstairs to the suite that had been his years ago, the one he'd been denied. Inside, the decor had changed. No more gold accents or velvet furniture. Just simple oak, linen, and sunlight. Minimal, honest, enough. On the desk sat a binder labeled Ethics Recertification Year 10. Marcus flipped it open and saw handwritten reflections from every department. Front desk, housekeeping, security, kitchen. Each one answered the same question: what does respect look like this year? The answers weren't corporate. They were human. Listening even when tired, noticing who gets ignored, giving second chances, making policies that sound like people wrote them. Marcus closed the binder and smiled. This was the audit he had dreamed of. Not numbers, not signatures, but consciousness. He walked to the window, the city glittering below like circuitry. Tessa joined him quietly. "You know," she said, "we're naming the next scholarship after you." Marcus shook his head. "Name it after the standard, not me." She grinned. "Already did. The Reed Standard Fellowship for Ethical Leadership." He chuckled softly. "You never listen." "Only to the right things," she said. They stood there for a while, watching the city reflect on the glass. No titles, no power plays, just two people who turned one night of prejudice into a blueprint for decency. When Marcus finally left the room, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. Downstairs, the lobby carried on, greeting, listening, remembering. And above the front desk, the gold plaque caught the morning light one more time, its reflection spilling across the marble like a quiet benediction. Respect is non-negotiable. Justice doesn't shout, it remembers. And memory, when designed well, never forgets who it's for.